Wife ignored my rules and let her unemployed, freeloading sister steal my Stratocaster, a family heirloom. We threatened to sue, and now our marriage is on the line. Throwaway account because my wife uses Reddit, and this is, well, let's just say it's a situation. I, 58M, have been married to Diana, 56F, for 25 years. We have what I've always considered a very solid marriage. We communicate well, we respect each other, and we've built a comfortable life together. But her younger sister, Wendy, 52F, has always been a persistent source of friction, and a recent incident has brought things to a head. I genuinely need to know if I'm being unreasonable in my reaction. Diana and I met in our early 30s. I was already a few years into my career as an accountant, a job I enjoy for its structure and predictability. Numbers make sense to me, people, sometimes, not so much. Diana was, and still is, a teacher, elementary school. She has the patience of a saint, which is probably why she puts up with me, and, frankly, why she puts up with Wendy. Our backgrounds were fairly similar. We both grew up in middle-class families. My parents were incredibly practical, down-to-earth people. They weren't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but they were incredibly responsible with their money. They instilled in me the importance of saving, of avoiding unnecessary debt, of living within your means. I remember my dad always saying, "Money doesn't grow on trees, son," whenever I'd ask for something extravagant as a kid. It wasn't said harshly, but it was a constant reminder of the value of hard work and financial prudence. They scrimped and saved for years to buy a small, modest cottage by the lake. It wasn't much, but it was their dream, and they achieved it through careful planning and discipline. Diana's family, however, well, they were a different story. Her parents, who are both deceased now, were always chasing the next big thing, the next get-rich-quick scheme. They'd invest in volatile stocks, start businesses they knew nothing about, and generally treat money like it was water flowing through their fingers. They were constantly in debt, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, as the saying goes. It created a lot of instability and stress in their household, from what Diana has told me. And Wendy, Diana's younger sister, unfortunately, seems to have inherited all of their worst financial habits, and none of their, few, redeeming qualities. She's never been able to hold down a steady job for more than a few months at a time. She drifts from one temporary position to another, always full of her potential and her entrepreneurial spirit, but never actually following through on anything. She has these elaborate fantasies of being a successful businesswoman, a fashion designer, a famous chef, you name it, she's probably dreamed of it. But she lacks the discipline, the work ethic, and, frankly, the basic common sense to make any of those dreams a reality. Diana, thankfully, is the complete opposite of her sister. She's grounded, responsible, and incredibly thoughtful. We've always been on the same page when it comes to finances. Early in our marriage, we decided to have a joint account for shared expenses and separate accounts for our individual spending. It's a system that's worked beautifully for us for 25 years. It allows us both a degree of independence while still ensuring that our shared financial responsibilities are met. We've built a comfortable life for ourselves, not extravagant, but secure. We've saved diligently for retirement, and we're on track to be able to live comfortably without financial worries. This security is something I value immensely, probably because of my parents' influence. But Wendy is a constant source of tension. Over the years, Diana has lent her sister money on countless occasions. Small amounts at first, then larger and larger sums. It's always the same story. Wendy is in a temporary bind. She needs a little help to get back on her feet. She promises to pay it back as soon as possible. Of course, as soon as possible never seems to arrive. I'd estimate that, over the past 2 decades, Diana has lent Wendy thousands of dollars, and I'd be surprised if she's seen more than a few $100s repaid. I've always tried to be understanding. I know family is important to Diana, and I respect that. I've never forbidden her from helping her sister, but I have gently, and sometimes not so gently, encouraged her to set some boundaries. I've pointed out, repeatedly, that enabling Wendy's irresponsible behavior isn't actually helping her in the long run. It's just perpetuating a cycle of dependence. The first truly significant incident that directly involved me occurred about 10 years ago. Wendy, in one of her fleeting moments of entrepreneurial ambition, decided she wanted to open a luxury pet grooming business. Now, Wendy has never owned a pet, has no training in animal care, and has absolutely no experience running a business of any kind. But she was convinced this was her ticket to riches. She needed a substantial loan to get started, and she asked Diana to co-sign it. Diana was seriously considering it. She wanted to support her sister, to believe in her, to give her a chance. I, however, put my foot down, and hard. I explained to Diana, in no uncertain terms, that co-signing the loan would make us legally responsible for the entire debt if Wendy defaulted, which, given her history, seemed almost inevitable. I painted a very clear picture of the potential consequences. It was a difficult conversation. Diana was upset with me, accusing me of being unsupportive and not understanding the importance of family loyalty. She argued that Wendy just needed a break, a chance to prove herself. I countered that we had already given her countless chances, and that this was far too risky. We went back and forth for days. Finally, Diana relented. She saw the logic in my argument, even if she didn't like it. She told Wendy she couldn't co-sign the loan. Wendy, predictably, was furious. She accused me of being controlling and manipulative, of deliberately sabotaging her dreams. She laid a massive guilt trip on Diana, claiming that I didn't believe in her and that Diana was choosing me over her own sister. The pet grooming business, unsurprisingly, was a complete disaster. It closed down within 6 months, leaving Wendy even deeper in debt. And, of course, she never apologized to Diana or me. She simply moved on to the next scheme, the next big idea. Fast forward to about 6 months ago. My uncle, my father's brother, passed away. He was a lifelong bachelor, a musician, and a genuinely kind soul. He left me his most prized possessions, a collection of vintage guitars. These weren't just any guitars, they were collector's items, some of them dating back to the 1960s. There was a beautiful old Gibson acoustic, a classic Fender Telecaster, and, the crown jewel, a 1967 Fender Stratocaster in pristine condition. To me, these guitars were far more than just musical instruments. I remember visiting him as a child and being mesmerized by the sounds he could create with those guitars. He'd let me strum them, carefully showing me how to hold them, even though I had absolutely no musical talent. When I inherited the collection, I knew I had to protect them. I converted our spare room into a small home office/music room. I installed a high-quality security system, including a reinforced door with multiple locks. I even had humidity control installed to keep the guitars in optimal condition. I rarely allowed anyone into that room, not even Diana. It wasn't that I didn't trust her, it was simply that those guitars were incredibly precious to me, and I wanted to minimize any risk of damage or, God forbid, theft. Then, about 6 months ago, Wendy hit another one of her rough patches. She'd lost her latest job, something about a personality conflict with her manager, which, knowing Wendy, probably meant she'd been insubordinate or unreliable. She was facing eviction from her apartment and, naturally, turned to Diana for help. Diana, being the compassionate person she is, offered to let Wendy stay with us for a few weeks while she got back on her feet. I was extremely hesitant. My gut feeling was that this was a terrible idea. But I also knew how much it meant to Diana to help her sister. So, I reluctantly agreed, but with very clear rules. I sat down with Diana and Wendy, and I laid down the ground rules. I told Wendy that she was welcome to stay in our guest room, that she was expected to respect our privacy, that there would be absolutely no borrowing money, and, most importantly, that she was under no circumstances to enter my office/music room. I made it crystal clear that the room was off limits, that it contained valuable and irreplaceable items, and that I would not tolerate any violation of that boundary. Wendy, of course, agreed to everything. She looked me straight in the eye, and promised to abide by the rules. For the first couple of weeks, things were surprisingly calm. Wendy kept to herself, mostly staying in the guest room. She made a few half-hearted attempts to find a job, but nothing materialized. I tried to avoid interacting with her as much as possible, not out of rudeness, but because I simply didn't trust her. Then, one afternoon, I came home from work early. I'd been feeling under the weather, a nasty headache and a general feeling of eating shit. I decided to go upstairs and lie down for a bit. As I walked past my office, I heard a faint noise, a sort of strumming sound. My heart sank. I knew, instantly, that something was wrong. I slowly opened the door, and there she was, Wendy, standing in the middle of my office, holding Stratocaster, that guitar. She was clumsily trying to play it. I was stunned. I felt a surge of anger. I managed to keep my voice relatively calm. "Wendy," I said, "what do you think you're doing?" She jumped, startled, and nearly dropped the guitar. She stammered, I was just looking. It's so beautiful. I was just admiring it." "Admiring it?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "You were playing it. And you're in my office, which I specifically told you was off limits." She tried to backtrack, to downplay the situation. "I just wanted to see it up close. I wasn't going to hurt it." "Put it down," I said, my voice firm. "Put it down now and get out of my office." She reluctantly placed the guitar back in its stand, looking sheepish and avoiding eye contact. I watched her leave, then I closed and locked the door behind her. I immediately inspected all the guitars, checking for any scratches or damage. Thankfully, everything seemed to be in order. But I was still incredibly shaken. This was a clear violation of my trust. I told Diana what had happened as soon as she got home from work. She was apologetic, she promised she'd talk to Wendy, that she'd make sure it never happened again. A week later, I had to go out of town for a business trip. It was a short trip, just 3 days, but I was apprehensive about leaving Wendy alone in the house. I reiterated to Diana, before I left, the importance of keeping Wendy out of my office. Diana assured me that she understood and that she would be vigilant. When I returned from the trip, everything seemed normal at first. Diana greeted me at the door, and we chatted about my trip, about her week at school. But I noticed something was off. She was fidgety, avoiding direct eye contact, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced with being nervous. Finally, after dinner, she confessed. While I was away, Wendy had approached her with another one of her sob stories. She claimed she had a gig, a chance to play music at some local bar or event. She needed a good guitar to play, she said, and she'd asked Diana if she could borrow one of mine. Diana, feeling pressured and, I suspect, guilty about the previous incident, had agreed. But, she insisted, she had only given Wendy permission to take one guitar, the least valuable one, an acoustic guitar I rarely played. She had specifically told Wendy not to touch the Stratocaster or any of the other electric guitars. My heart sank. I went straight to my office, unlocked the door, and my worst fears were confirmed. The acoustic guitar was gone, as expected. But the case for the 1967 Fender Stratocaster was also empty. I turned to Diana. "She took the Stratocaster, didn't she?" Diana burst into tears. She admitted that Wendy had taken the Stratocaster as well, claiming that the acoustic wasn't good enough for the gig and that she needed a better instrument. Diana hadn't known about it until after Wendy had already left with it. She tried to stop her by calling her on her phone to return it, but Wendy had been insistent, promising to return it in perfect condition. I immediately tried calling Wendy. My calls went straight to voicemail. I left furious messages, demanding that she return the guitars immediately, threatening legal action. Few hours turned into a days, and still no word from Wendy. Diana was beside herself, constantly apologizing, frantically trying to reach her sister. She felt responsible, and she was, to a degree. But I was beyond the point of caring about her excuses. Finally, after nearly 10 days of silence, Wendy called Diana back. The story she spun was outrageous. She claimed she'd had to sell the guitars to pay for emergency rent and other essential expenses. She insisted that she'd always intended to buy them back eventually, that she just needed a little more time. She had the audacity to act like she was the victim. I was speechless. I couldn't believe the level of entitlement, the sheer gall of this woman. I told Diana that this was beyond unacceptable, that this was theft, plain and simple. I told her that Wendy needed to return the guitars, or she needed to pay me their full market value, which, for the Stratocaster alone, was a substantial sum, well into 5 figures. Diana, to her credit, finally seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. She agreed that Wendy was completely out of line. She tried reasoning with her, pleading with her, but Wendy was unyielding. She said she didn't understand why I was making such a big deal out of a couple of old guitars. She accused me of being materialistic and uncaring about her struggles. She even tried to turn it around on Diana, saying that Diana should be supporting her family instead of siding with me. This is where I'm questioning myself, where I need outside perspective. I told Diana that, since she had given Wendy permission to take the acoustic guitar, and since Wendy was clearly not going to take responsibility, I expected Diana to cover the cost of replacing it. It wasn't about the money, though the guitar was worth several $100s, it was about the principle. Diana had violated my trust, and she needed to take some responsibility for the consequences. As for the Stratocaster, I told Diana that I held Wendy primarily responsible, but that since Diana had facilitated the theft, albeit unintentionally, I expected her to do everything in her power to get it back or to ensure that Wendy compensated me for its loss. I told her that if Wendy refused to cooperate, I would consider legal action, including filing a police report and suing her in small claims court. Diana was devastated. She argued that she didn't have that kind of money readily available, that it would deplete her personal savings, that it would put a significant strain on our finances. She accused me of being unfair, of prioritizing material possessions over family. We've been arguing about this constantly for the past few weeks. The situation with Wendy remains unresolved. The guitars are still gone. Our marriage is under a big amount of strain. I understand that my wife was trying to help her sister, that she was put in a difficult position, but I feel like she completely disregarded my feelings. So, Reddit, Ida here? Am I being unreasonable for refusing to simply absorb the loss of these valuable and sentimental guitars? I'm genuinely torn. I love my wife, but I also feel like I need to stand up for myself and protect my assets. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who responded to my initial post. The outpouring of support and advice has been overwhelming, and honestly, quite validating. It's been incredibly helpful to hear from so many people who have experienced similar situations, and to know that I'm not alone in feeling this way. Many of you pointed out, quite rightly, that while Wendy is undoubtedly the primary culprit in this situation, Diana bears a significant degree of responsibility as well. You're absolutely correct. In the heat of my anger and frustration over the stolen guitars, I was primarily focused on Wendy's blatant theft and disregard for my property. I hadn't fully processed Diana's role in enabling it, in creating the opportunity for Wendy to do what she did. Reading your comments, many of which emphasized the importance of trust and boundaries in a marriage, helped me to see things more clearly. I realized I was directing most of my anger outward, at Wendy, when a significant portion of it needed to be addressed with Diana. I had a long, and very difficult, conversation with Diana last night. It wasn't a shouting match, thankfully. I told Diana that I was sorry for focusing solely on Wendy's actions and for not fully acknowledging her part in this mess. I told her that I understood she was trying to help her sister, that she was motivated by a desire to be supportive and loving. But I also explained, as calmly and clearly as I could, how deeply her actions had hurt me. I reiterated the sentimental value of the guitars, especially the Stratocaster. I tried to convey to her that it wasn't just about the monetary value, although that was certainly significant. It was about the memories and the connection to my uncle. I told her that I felt like she had prioritized Wendy's needs and wants over the trust that is fundamental to our marriage. Diana listened this time. And she apologized, again. She admitted that she'd been enabling Wendy for years, driven by a combination of guilt, family loyalty, and a perhaps naive hope that Wendy would eventually change. She confessed that she'd always felt like the responsible one in her family. She acknowledged that giving Wendy permission to take any of my guitars, after I had explicitly forbidden it, was a massive breach of trust. We talked about solutions, about how to move forward. Diana doesn't have enough money in her personal savings to cover the full replacement value of both guitars, not even close. The Stratocaster alone is worth a considerable amount. Here's what we've decided, at least for now. 1. Diana will use what she does have in her personal savings to purchase a replacement acoustic guitar. It won't be the exact same model, of course, but she'll find a comparable one, something of similar quality and value. 2. We're giving Wendy one final opportunity to do the right thing. We're giving her 1 week to either return the guitar in its original condition or to provide us with the full amount of money she received for selling it, along with verifiable proof of the sale price. I'm not optimistic, but we felt we had to give her one last chance. 3. If Wendy fails to comply within the week, we will proceed with legal action. Many of you suggested small claims court, and that seems like the most logical route. We're going to consult with a lawyer to discuss our options and to ensure we're following the correct procedures. The thought of suing my sister-in-law is incredibly unpleasant, but I feel like I have to protect my. 4. This whole ordeal has exposed some deep-seated issues in our communication and in how we handle family conflicts. We've both agreed that we need professional help to work through these issues. We've already scheduled our first appointment with a marriage counselor. I'm hopeful that this will help us to strengthen our relationship and to develop healthier coping mechanisms. 5. I cannot emphasize this enough. It's clear we have to have very strict boundaries in place. This isn't a magical solution. It doesn't bring back my Stratocaster. It doesn't erase the hurt and anger I feel. But it's a start. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and I wish I could say that things have magically resolved themselves. They haven't. But there has been some progress, and, unfortunately, some further complications. The 1 week deadline we gave Wendy to return the Stratocaster or provide the money came and went with a predictable result: absolutely nothing. No guitar, no money, no communication. She ignored our calls. It was as if we didn't exist. Diana, to her credit, finally managed to get Wendy on the phone after several days of trying. The conversation, according to Diana, was a masterclass in deflection and manipulation. Wendy spun a tale about how the guitar was in storage at a friend's house, and she couldn't get to it right now because of some excuse. She promised, vaguely, to work something out, but it was all smoke and mirrors. It was clear she had no intention of taking responsibility for her actions. So, we followed through with our plan. We consulted with a lawyer, who confirmed that we had a solid case for small claims court. He explained the process and warned us that even with a judgment in our favor, collecting the money from Wendy could be a long and difficult process. We filed the paperwork. Wendy was served with the lawsuit. And that's when the real drama began. Wendy, predictably, reacted with outrage. She called Diana, screaming, crying, accusing us of being heartless. She claimed she had no idea the guitar was so valuable, that we were being completely unreasonable, that we were acting like millionaires, which we are most definitely not. Diana, however, stood firm. This was a significant step for her. In the past, she would have likely crumbled under the pressure, apologized, and tried to smooth things over. But this time, she held her ground. She told Wendy that this was a direct consequence of her actions, that she had stolen from us, and that she needed to take responsibility. It took little over a month and the court date was scheduled for last week. I was a nervous wreck leading up to it. I'd never been involved in any kind of legal proceeding before, and the whole thing felt incredibly intimidating. I spent hours preparing my testimony, gathering documentation, and trying to anticipate any questions Wendy's lawyer, if she even had one, might ask. The morning of the court date arrived. We arrived at the courtroom, found our seats, and waited. Wendy never showed up. The judge waited for the allotted time, then proceeded with the hearing. He reviewed our documentation, listened to my brief testimony, and, finding no reason to dispute our claim, ruled in our favor by default. We were awarded the full amount we had requested, the estimated market value of the Stratocaster, plus the cost of the replacement acoustic guitar that Diana had already purchased. We had the judgment, but we knew that collecting the money from Wendy would be a Herculean task, if not impossible. The lawyer had explained the various methods of enforcement: garnishing wages, highly unlikely, given Wendy's employment history; placing a lien on property, even more unlikely, as she doesn't own anything of value; seizing assets, which she also doesn't seem to have. I'm not holding my breath. I'm realistic. I doubt we'll ever see the full amount, or perhaps any of it, anytime soon. But, as I said before, it's become more about the principle than the money. It's about setting a boundary, about demonstrating to Diana that enabling her sister's behavior is not okay. On a more positive note, the couple's counseling has been incredibly beneficial. It's been hard work, painful at times, but it's also been incredibly revealing. We're learning to communicate more effectively, to express our needs and concerns without resorting to blame or accusations. Diana is working on recognizing and breaking her codependent patterns with Wendy. She's understanding that helping her sister often means enabling her destructive behavior. I'm working on being more patient and understanding, on recognizing the pressure Diana has been under from her family for her entire life. We've also established a new, and very firm, rule: Wendy is no longer welcome in our home. This was a difficult decision for Diana, but she ultimately agreed that it was necessary. I need to feel safe and secure in my own house, and I can't do that with Wendy around. It's a sad situation, but it's a necessary boundary.